So I've also been talking in very general terms about how important literacy is. And now I'm going to illustrate this with real-life examples that relate to actual individuals and how big the effects are in Canada. The first one are the equivalent of radioactive half-lives. Instead of looking at radioactive decay, we're looking here at the decay of unemployment. The blue line is high-skilled people, people with level 3, 4, and 5 literacy skills. The red line are level 1 and 2 people. And what we're looking at is once someone gets unemployed, how long does it take people to get reemployed? For skilled people, it takes half of them 9 weeks to get reemployed. So not so long, a couple of weeks without employment and then back into a job. For the low-skilled people, it takes half of them 38 weeks to get back into employment. And so from an individual point of view, you certainly want to be in the level 3, 4, and 5 and not in the level 1 and 2. From a public policy point of view, the costs of the employment insurance system are punishing low-skilled people by keeping them in unemployment by 4 times longer. And from an economic point of view, this is incredibly punishing. The labor market is sorting and selecting people on their skill and leaving the low-skilled behind. Not something we want to interfere with because it's economically efficient, but you have to worry about the impact on low-skilled people as a result. This next chart looks at the impact that skill has on people's wages. So we're able to explain a good part of the differences in what different people earn, and those differences are attributable to the natural things, to people's education levels, to their work experience, and what we see from this chart is their skill level. In fact, in Canada, more of what the differences in people earn is attributable to their average literacy skill than any other country in this display. So 33% of those differences can be traced directly back to differences in literacy skill. So what does this do? People with skill get higher wages, people with lower skill get lower wages. A second thing that this chart reveals is that a country like Sweden, the impact of literacy skill is actually quite low. It explains only 10% of the explainable wage variability in Sweden. This we found to be a paradox because Sweden is the most literate country that we've measured to date, and it has very little variation in literacy skill across the population. So after a little head scratching about the economics of this, what we realized was employers in Sweden aren't idiots. They don't have to pay any wage premiums because everybody has this economically valuable asset of literacy. And so there are wage differences in Sweden, but they go to other things, creativity, that are patently fairer than differences in literacy skill. And finally, there's something about this chart that it actually isn't on the chart. We have data for another country where the impact of literacy on wages is actually bigger than observed in Canada. 43% of wage variation in this country is attributable to literacy skill differences. And that country is the People's Republic of China, which has what, by this standard, the most capitalist, efficient labor market in the world. So the Chinese have a huge supply of education and skill. They also have the market mechanisms to create incentives for individuals to get skill in the first place, and then the tool to apply those skills. And so in competitive terms, we should be absolutely afraid. Were this not bad enough, all of what I've said so far is in the process of being amplified. The diffusion of computer technologies into general life and the production processes at work mean that people that have computer skills get ahead. Computer skills, what this chart looks at is how does your literacy skill level influence the probability that you're going to be a heavy computer user? And at the top of this chart you have Bermuda, where highly literate people, those people in level 4 and 5, are 3.5 times more likely to be heavy computer users than their less literate peers. In Canada, it's about 2.5 times more likely. Computer skills are economically productive skills as well. It turns out that they amplify basic literacy differences. Suppose that you're highly literate and a heavy computer user. How much more likely are you to be in a stable, high-wage job? In Switzerland, at the top of this chart, you're 6 times more likely to have one of those desirable jobs. 6 times more likely is really a big effect. In Canada, you're 5 times more likely to be in one of those desirable jobs. So if you're thinking like an individual would, on which side of this skill fence do I want to sit? I want to be on the high-skilled side. That'll give me access to computer technology that I can trade on the market to get a better job, a higher wage job, and a more stable job. So enough with the labor market side. It's all about economics and earning and employment. There are also huge health effects we've identified. This chart plots for each health region in Canada the incidence rate or prevalence rate of diabetes. Diabetes is one of the most punishing diseases that the health system has to deal with. It eventually kills you. People go blind, they suffer amputation, and it's a terrible disease to manage on a daily basis. Hard on the people that have it, hard on their families. It's also extraordinarily expensive for the health system to deal with in terms of all of the management of the symptoms of the disease. This chart displays the relationship between health literacy, so literacy and numeracy skills applied to health tasks, and the prevalence rate of diabetes in every one of Canada's health regions. And the black line reveals the relationship between these two things. What it says is that the higher the health literacy, the lower the prevalence rate of diabetes. And you see a 5-fold difference between the best health districts and the worst. And so this sets up investments in literacy might lower prevalence rates of diabetes, reduce health costs, reduce the demand on the healthcare system, and therefore reduce pressure on the tax base to fund that treatment. So not only is literacy an economically productive asset for creating goods and services, it also has a huge impact on our health.